A Journey to the Center of the Earth, Chapter 6, The Hansbach. When Hans didn't return in the next hour, wild reasons why he would have left us crossed my mind, each reason crazier than the last. I must have been either half or wholly mad. Suddenly, I heard the sound of footsteps coming up the tunnel and saw Hans's light shining on the walls of the passage. Hans approached my uncle and gently wakened him. My uncle instantly rose and asked, "Well?" "Water," said Hans without a trace of emotion. "Water! Water!" I cried, wildly clapping my hands and jumping up and down. "Where?" asked my uncle. "Below." We quickly got ready to move, and within a short time we were making a rapid descent into the tunnel. An hour later we had advanced 1,000 yards and had descended 2,000 feet. At that moment I heard a familiar sound, a kind of dull roar, like that of a distant waterfall. "Hans was right," my uncle cried happily. "That is the roar of moving water." "There can be no doubt?" I asked, still afraid to be certain. "There's not the slightest doubt about it," my uncle answered. "An underground river is running beside us somewhere." At first it sounded like the river ran right above our heads. Then the sound came from the wall at our left. I touched the hard rock wall, hoping to find a sign of moisture or the coolness of the water, but all I could feel was the hard rock itself. We advanced down the tunnel. A half an hour passed, then an hour. We could hear the water, but it was so deeply buried in the hard rock that we could not touch or see it. We continued to walk, but the sound of the water seemed to be getting dimmer. It was obvious that we were moving away from the water, so we retraced our steps to the point where we could hear the water the loudest. There, we stood silently and stared at the wall. In a few moments, a smile broke across Hans's face. He went to the wall, put his ear against it, and smiled again. Then he picked up a crowbar and began attacking the wall 3 feet above the tunnel floor. "Save!" I cried. "We're saved!" "Yes," cried my uncle, even more excited than I. "Hans is right. We would never have thought of that ourselves." After an hour's work with the crowbar, Hans had made a hole 6 inches wide and 2 feet deep into the rock. The hole could not be wider, or else it would bring the entire wall down on Hans and on us. The waiting was terrible. I could taste the water so much that my lips and throat became even more parched than before. My uncle and I were just getting ready to go to work on the wall ourselves. Whatever the danger, when we heard a loud, welcome hiss, then a jet of water burst through the wall with such force that it hit the opposite side of the tunnel. Hans cried out in pain. I did not understand why until I plunged my hands into the sparkling water and drew back with a wild, frantic cry. "It's boiling hot!" I cried in disappointment and pain. "Well, never mind," my uncle answered. "It will soon cool." My uncle was right. In a short time, enough of the liquid was cool for each of us to have a long drink. We drank greedily, without really tasting the water at all. Afterwards, I realized that the water had a mineral taste to it. "Since we are the first travelers to discover the stream," said my uncle, "I think we should name it after Hans." "Agreed," I said. We named the stream Hansbach, or Hans Stream. I wanted to fill our goatskins with the precious liquid, but my uncle explained that the flowing water would follow us in our descent and provide refreshment when we needed it. "Then there is no reason why we cannot now continue on our journey," I said. "Ah, my boy," my uncle said, laughing, "you have finally begun to believe that the journey is possible." "Not only possible, sir," I said, "but I am now confident in our success. Let us get on with our descent." But my uncle was not ready. "Just a moment," he said. "It is night, and we ought to sleep for a while before we continue." By the next day, Thursday, when we awoke, I had forgotten all our past suffering. We had a good breakfast, drank our fill of the water that had been cooling all night long, and began our descent at 8 o'clock in the morning. The tunnel moved downwards in twists and turns to the southwest, according to my uncle's compass. That day and the next, we did a considerable amount of horizontal, but very little vertical traveling, although at times the way did get steep. On Friday evening, the 10th of July, we estimated our position to be 90 miles southeast of Reykjavik, Iceland, and about 7.5 miles deep into the earth. We now received a startling surprise. Under our feet there opened a deep well. It went straight down into the earth and was frightening to look at. But my uncle did not think so. "Look at this," he cried with delight. "The rock projections in this well will serve as a staircase to take us a long way into the bowels of the earth." Hans got out the ropes, and we began our descent into the well. We were, in fact, descending a narrow spiral, much like the staircase found in some homes. As trained geologists, we had done climbing such as this before, and once we began the descent, it did not seem too bad an idea at all. After a while, however, our calves ached, and we had to stop to rest every 15 minutes. We ate and drank as we rested, for the water from the Hansbach flowed down the well along with us. During the next 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, we followed the spiral staircase downward, going about 6 miles further into the earth. We were now about 15 miles below sea level. On Monday, however, at about noon, the well took a more gentle slope, and we were traveling more on a road. We traveled that road until Wednesday the 15th, when we were actually 21 miles below sea level. My uncle calculated that we were approximately 150 miles from Snaffles, where we had begun our journey 15 days before. "If your calculations are right, Uncle," I said, "we are no longer under Iceland." "Do you think so?" he asked. "We can easily find out," I said, pulling out a map and a compass. I measured carefully, then held a map out to my uncle. "You see," I said, "those 150 miles to the southeast put us under the open sea." "Under the open sea!" cried my uncle with delight. "No doubt," I said. "The ocean flows over our heads this very minute." This idea was not such a pleasant one to me. The mighty Atlantic Ocean was resting on the granite roof above my head. 3 days later, Saturday the 18th of July, we reached a vast grotto, a kind of underground cavern. My uncle decided that the next day, being Sunday, we should have a day of rest. End of chapter 6.